Welcome to Inside the Director's Circle and this episode on why most change initiatives fail. I'm Jason Langford-Brown, your host, founder of the Director's Circle, practicing business advisor and coach and psychologist. Over the next two episodes, we are going to explore implementing successful change. But the reality is, for most organisations and individuals, they fail miserably in this regard. That's why in this first episode, we are going to explore the reasons why most change initiatives fail. To add some expertise to the subject, we're delighted to welcome one of our knowledge partners from the Director's Circle, Dr. Chris Mason, founder and chairman of Mindshop. And after a successful career as a CEO and one of the world's most inspirational business advisors, Chris is now a doctor in organisational behavioural psychology and has developed the world's only statistically proven model for change success. So some fascinating insights in store, I'm sure. And just very quickly, before we get into the discussion, remember this is just a snapshot of what happens within our business leader community. So if you want to get more involved or access further insights, visit directors-circle.com and click Join the Community button. So Chris, delighted to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So just to get us off, really, I think it'd be interesting to know, what do the statistics actually say about change success/failure? What do we actually mean by change failure in your opinion?
Well, there's two questions there. The first one on the statistics. The research since the 70s hasn't really changed, and all the studies are showing that the probability of success of any change initiative is, on average, about 30%. And so there's a multitude of reasons for that. It depends a little bit on each organisation, but people forget that there's an overall high-level framework. If you want to change anything in life, the first stage is to unfreeze it. Then you've got to change it somehow and then refreeze it. And people often forget those three steps. And so they might unfreeze it and have a very half-hearted change and not attempt to refreeze it, or they don't unfreeze it properly. And some of the old habits continue across and sabotage the change process. So unfortunately, it's a 30%, and what that means is trial and error. So the average person will have a go, and let's say that they're 30%, they'll dust themselves off, learn from the first failure, and try again. And they might have to try 2 or 3 times. The problem with that is the cost, both in financial and human terms, of those failures, of not getting it right the first time.
So I'm hearing three things there really is that even the 30% of those that succeed are not doing it successfully the first time. It's, as you said, trial and error, lots of waste emotionally and commercially, I should imagine. And then the people that are failing, they're either just not getting the change in the first place, or they're making the change probably through their authority as leaders, but they're not locking it in. So it kind of unravels quite quickly later on.
That's correct. And the reason I picked this as a topic is that at the time I was looking for a topic. A client of mine and a friend in Ireland actually committed suicide. And I can only suppose, but what I guess happened, he had 1 or 2 goes at trying to fix his problem. It was a manufacturing business. There was a downturn in the country at the time. I actually spoke to him and he was in tears. He said to Chris, I don't know what I'm doing. Gave him some guidance, but obviously I don't live in Ireland, so I wasn't able to keep close to him. Thought everything was okay, but it wasn't. And he decided that the best option for him is not be here. And that emotionally impacted on me. And the positive thing was a silver lining came out. I thought, yep, that's what I need to fix. How do we stop that 30%? And what are the exemplars in the world doing? What's their percentage look like? And we're able to identify that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's almost a terrible reason for sort of taking on this initiative, Chris. But often good things come out of these situations. But I think it's interesting that with the change being so difficult, people are probably mentally running away from it a lot as well. So there's obviously, I would say, a lot of mindset stuff going on here. What are the big mindset challenges do you think for leaders?
Yeah, well, at the moment we've had, here we are, 2022. We've had 3 years of challenges, and in my opinion, it's not going to change for probably another 2 years. So let's say we're just over halfway through. There's a whole lot of biases that people come into a situation with to start with, let alone let's not even look at whether they know the best way of doing the change. But some of the biases of, the halo effect, where they have preconceived ideas of what's right and wrong and who's good and who's not. They have that confirmation bias, where they have selective opinions on who to believe and who not. Authority basis, that bias that where they think the boss is always right, or some influencer specialist in that area must know, and so on. There's I wrote a book around all this, and I was only just flicking through it again today, but I wrote it back in 2019, and I think I listed something like 15 or 20 biases that we have. So it's not easy to get this right because we're flawed to start with.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And do you think that's fueled by the pace of change? I hear a lot of people saying, the pace of change is accelerating. Is it really accelerating? Is that a bit of a figment of our imagination? What's your opinion on that?
It's a figment because I remember when I was about early 20s, a long time ago, I had that exact thought. I was working in an engineering organization at the time, and I remember clearly thinking, I can replay the video, we're changing too fast, it's not right. And I just didn't realize that it was me not coping with the speed of change was the problem, not that, we have to change, the world change, you can't stop it. And you can put your hand up if you like, but you'll get run over. So it's how we deal with change is the challenge, and by definition an opportunity for you as well. So no, I think it's always been like this.
Yeah, okay, it's interesting. Yeah, a lot of noise that we listen to that isn't always useful. So I suppose the question then, if the pace of change is just has always been there and we have to embrace it because you're right, the world always changes. Is it about trying to do too much change? Is that the real challenge?
Probably what that comment makes me think of is that when people haven't framed what the change initiative is really about, they're often trying to fix the wrong thing. So they're fixing symptoms of a much deeper issue. For example, they might think they've got a sales problem, but they actually don't. It's a leadership problem. So they spent their time fixing the sales problem, finding it doesn't work because they didn't touch what the root cause was, which was poor leadership of the sales department. So they might be playing around with websites and sales processes and sales training, and they go, well, that didn't work. Uh, and
Yeah,
it was never going to because they're fixing the wrong issue.
yeah, absolutely. So how do we get into root cause? What's a bit of advice there you could help people with?
Well, there's a very simple technique that we use, which is called 5 whys, where if you say, I've got a sales problem, why have I got a sales problem? It's because we're not converting enough. Why aren't we converting enough? And you just keep asking why till you get to that root cause. Now, the downside of that tool, there's a lot of sidetracking you can do unless you're experienced. But when you're applying those 5 questions to a group, after a while you can pick where the dead ends are and avoid them, and you can guide them so they actually realize actually the problem is we don't actually have the right leadership here. And or it might not be that I shouldn't be picking on leaders. It might be that we have the wrong products, or we've got the wrong product quality, or we've got the wrong customers. um, but you need to find what that is, and just by asking why 5 times, a very simple technique, but the best one is to ask the customer, and they'll tell you. So if you actually survey the customers, in every organisation that I'm involved in, um, we do that annually, and I pore over the data because there are gems in there. But I don't trust the data because all those biases I was talking about. I will also go and talk to the actual customers and frame questions that are slightly out of context so that when they answer it, their body language will tell me what the real answer is. Because sometimes they want to be the nice guy and they don't want to tell you, even though deep down they know telling you the truth is best for me. They don't want to offend me. They think I'm whatever they think, and oh no, I don't want to say that. And then you don't get to the truth. So um, sales data, if that's what your issue is, surveys, but talking to real customers, and then working out what's best practice and looking at what your competitors are doing will give you probably a very good start to fixing what the real issue is.
So I love that notion of talking to your customers. I just wonder, I don't see it very often, but occasionally I see, some leaders and some organisations are really brave and they'll even involve their customers in their change processes and their projects, even though they may have to show some of their dirty laundry in the process. Have you got a view on that? Have you got any examples where you've seen businesses do that really well?
Yeah, because often the problem is equally shared between the customer and the supplier. So when you look at the interfaces between the two, it's quite common that we'll set up a project team which has got, say, 3 people from the customer and 3 from the supplier. and actually integrate the two groups together, build trust, and actually fix it together. Because there's no point in us getting our part of the equation right if theirs isn't. So you always need to have a close working relationship with your customers.
How would you go about starting that process of bringing a customer into the change process?
Well, it often starts at a senior level. So if the relationship between the two CEOs, if I can be just simple about it,
Hmm.
that's where it'll start. If there's trust at that level, and that the customer believes that actually developing a partnership with you is the right approach, and they support the interaction at the lower levels, so at the sales team levels and customers, then it'll be fine. But without that leadership support, it's probably the probability of success is lower. So you need to start at the top. People have got to understand why it's beneficial for both parties. And once you're supported, you just get on. And then as you go through the process, you'll get data, and that data will drive you in a different direction, depending on what you find. And it could be a variety of issues, but you may have to go anywhere in that organisation. You might even find that customer is not the right one for you. That's rare, but that's the worst that can happen. So there's no downside. I think I don't have a specific figure, but I'd estimate a 90% probability you're going to improve the relationship significantly and build a lifelong customer, which is the aim of the game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the bit people miss, isn't it? Actually brings them closer to their customers, doesn't actually put them at risk. Chris, we mentioned leaders and leadership quite a lot already through this initial part of the recording. And I wonder if I hear leaders often blaming their teams, blaming their staff for the fact they can't drive change. But I have a suspicion that probably a lot of the reasons change doesn't happen is because of the leaders themselves. Do you have a view on that?
I must be lucky, because when I think about the leaders I deal with, um, I don't get much of that, but I have seen it in the long past, where you know, don't start with me, start with them. They're the problem. I reckon it'd
Hmm.
be 20, 30 years since I've heard that. Now, why is that the case? I can think of two reasons. I think leaders today are better educated to know that's such a stupid statement to make, that they tend not to,
Hmm.
even if they actually believe it. They don't make it, so that's why I'm not hearing it. But I think the second thing is that I've selected really good clients and had a distillation process where some of my leaders I deal with have been uh, we've been working together for 25, 30 years. So I don't tend to be attracted to people that think that way. So I am proud to work for the people I work with. And I'm just thinking of the calls I've already had today. Um, Quite big firms, very professional, appreciative of the help, willing to listen, willing to act on what you say. That's the sort of leader I like working with. And
Yeah,
so does everyone else. I'm not on my own
yeah.
there. And so I don't hear that it's not me anymore. In fact, I'm more likely to hear it is me. Can you help change me?
So that humble, authentic approach to leadership is definitely prevailing there.
Yeah, and a bit of imposter syndrome thrown in there quite often. If they've got somewhere
Yeah,
pretty quickly and it's a big organisation, they
yeah,
feel. As someone said to me only this morning, I'm in the big office on the corner, and I started here as like a cadet equivalent. Uh, it doesn't feel right that I'm now here and I'm the boss of 300 people. And that was said to
yeah,
me this
absolutely.
morning. Yeah, which is good, because that shows the humility and uh, the quality of that person, who's exceptional, by the way.
Yeah,
Um, and he's, but he's probably still got a lot to learn on change, but he wants to learn it. That's the point.
yeah,
He's open to
yeah.
learning. He believes in lifelong learning. And that's why he likes me as his coach, because I'm constantly challenging him, and I'm not rude with it, but I won't let him get away with things.
I like that, Chris. And I think often, as you said, often these people are much more exceptional than they give themselves credit for. But I don't know. My view is actually it's really powerful that they're still continually challenging themselves because they're always looking to progress, be better. They got lifelong learning, whatever sort of description you want to
Yeah,
use. But would you agree that it's quite a powerful trait for a successful leader?
it is, and it's tied to what their goals are. So he gave me a goal, and I haven't mentioned anything about it, so I won't break any confidence. But he thought when he came into the job 3 years ago he would like to get to 50 mil. He's going to hit that in the next few months. So we talked today about a legacy of getting it to 100 mil. And the point I made to him as a leader, he has to behave like he's running a 100 mil business now at
Yeah.
50, otherwise he will never get to 100. So,
Yeah.
and he got that, and we actually worked out a plan and a theme for the rest of this year and a theme for next year that will, within 5 to 6 years, take him to the 100 mil. We could get there quicker, but I think we're just adding risk, so I wouldn't recommend that.
Mm.
So that was like a 35-minute call. We got all that done. So that's how quickly you can do it when you've got the right leader as your
Yeah.
customer.
And could you take that thinking, Chris, into any kind of change, any change initiative, vision? You know, bring the behaviour of what the change is you want to be into the present. Is that a powerful tactic approach?
I can think of people where it's an individual that are struggling with their performance, with their job satisfaction, with their mental health, and the same process works. And I don't change. I don't have to change my language at all. I just have to change the context. So
Mm.
whether it's a single person that's got a problem with one of their children, for example, and we're working on that, and they realise that they're half the problem themselves, and we're working on it. I just have to change context. So I could go from call to call to call, changing context, and I don't have to change the process because I know how change works. And whether it's personal or corporate, um, it's the same process.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
still
Great.
have to work out where they are now, unfreeze them, change them, and refreeze them into a new
Yeah.
thing, and create new habits. And that's the big challenge. Is a new habit takes on average about 6 weeks. So how do I get them to do something without talking to them every day for 6 weeks so they create the new habit? Well, I've worked out ways to do that by checking
Yeah.
in, by maybe I only need to see them at the 3 or 4 week part, and I'll know if they're on track or not. So
Yeah.
it seems to work. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to help more than a handful of people, and I don't want to do that. I want to help lots of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. Having that accountability in the free stage for business leaders with their teams is definitely something to consider. Chris, I'm just conscious of time today, but I just wanted to dispel one more myth. I think in the notion of change initiatives failing, and that's the one that people just generally dislike change. I think that's a bit of a myth, but what's your professional opinion on that?
No, like if you take a group of say 90 people, and the reason for 90 will become apparent. So I take a third of them. Now you know why 90. I can do the math. So there's 10 that love change, probably for the sake of it. There's 10 that will accept change if it makes sense, and there's 10 that won't have changed. They just find it too threatening for whatever reason, and it's all in their upbringing, in their prior history. It's all very predictable. So that third rule always works for me. And so what I do is I find the third that want the change. I then create good examples, role models, and understand the factors that we've identified in our research on change. There's 10 of them. And I apply those factors. I get the first third successful. That attracts the second third, and I probably will never get the final third. And I'm accepting of that because they're normally not in key roles, and they'll just go along for the ride, and that's fine
Yeah.
as long as they don't block and don't resist it too much. They can in their words and their language and in their behaviours if they like, but that puts them at risk if they're not careful. But if it's not impacting what's happening in the overall organisation, I just don't mind. I haven't got time to worry about them. I work with the first 2/3.
It's like you're saying, then, Chris, is that once you get the bulk over, then the rest will tend to follow because it's in their interest to. Otherwise, they might be out of a job or whatever the reason is. But it does dispel that myth that I hear lots of people saying, I need to work on the hard ones first, because if I get those over the line, I can get anybody over the line. But actually, it's the opposite. It's get the easy ones over
Yeah,
the line and get the critical mass.
yeah. The other ones just want to be shown the way, and that's all you need to do, and it'll happen. It's actually a lot easier than you think once you know how.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your 10 levers, and we'll talk about that in the next podcast. But just to wrap up today, Chris, maybe your top 3 tips to trying to eradicate the issue of change initiatives failing.
Well, I think The first tip, if there's three, would be to work out what your specific barriers are. Look into your history of how you've tried to apply change before, and there would have been successes and there would have been failures. If you get that, then pick the right person to drive the change, and the closer to the top of the organisation, the better. If you really think it's important, maybe the CEO needs to be involved, and maybe leads that change. And the third one is make sure you use the right change process. If you just fiddle at the edges, it'll never work. And the tendency is you won't accept responsibility. You'll blame the process. Natural, but so learn from the history, pick the right change agent to drive it, and then make sure that you engage with the people and make sure that you get success. I'm adding a fourth one, I guess, here, to make sure you get some successes early to encourage them to keep going.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. I think it's a really strong way to finish the discussion. And so Chris, thank you for joining us today. In the next episode, Chris will be back when we'll be discussing how to actually drive those higher change success rates and looking deeper into that process element that Chris talked about. In the meantime, if you want more information on this subject, reach out to one of our knowledge partners, Lucid, who are practitioners of Chris's work at lucid-group.com. Or as I've mentioned earlier, log on to directors-circle.com and join the community. Thank you for listening to Inside the Directors Circle.